The 19-year-old alien princess mocked the human soldier. So he took off his armor and walked backslash the crystal hall of the Aurelian palace was designed to impress and intimidate at the same time. Tall walls of living crystal curved upward like frozen waves, glowing softly with colors that shifted as people moved. Every step echoed, reminding visitors that this place did not belong to them. Delegations from many worlds stood in long lines, their finest armor polished, their banners floating gently in the controlled air. This hall had seen treaties signed and empires humbled, and today it waited to judge another outsider. At the center of the hall stood Princess Sarilith of the Aurelians. She was 19 by her people's count, young but already confident. Her skin shimmered faintly like pearl stone, and her eyes reflected the light of the crystals around her. She had been raised among power and comfort, surrounded by tutors, guards, and stories of Aurelian superiority. To her, strength meant advanced armor, perfect shields, and technology that could bend the laws of nature. She watched the gathered species with mild interest, her posture relaxed, her expression calm and slightly amused. When the announcer spoke of the next delegate, the tone shifted. "Representative of Earth, human military escort present." A murmur moved through the hall. Humans were known but rarely invited here. They were considered new, rough, and overly proud of surviving harsh worlds. Sarilith leaned forward slightly, curiosity mixed with doubt. The human soldier stepped forward alone. There was no dramatic entrance, no shining escort. He wore armor, but it was plain and clearly used. The surface showed scratches and marks of long service. It did not glow, it did not float, it did not reshape itself. Compared to the armored champions standing nearby, the human looked almost unfinished. Sarilith let out a quiet laugh without meaning to. It was not cruel, just honest. "That is the human soldier," she said softly, her voice carrying easily through the hall. "Is this armor from a museum or from a scrapyard?" Some of the delegates chuckled, others watched in silence. The human soldier did not react. He stood still, hands relaxed at his sides, helmet facing forward. His posture was straight, balanced, and calm. Sarilith tilted her head. "I was told humans are survivors," she continued. "Yet you bring one who looks barely protected. Is this your idea of bravery or simply ignorance?" Still no answer. The elders seated high above the hall exchanged glances. This was not how these introductions usually went. Many species responded to mockery with pride or anger. The human did neither. At last, the soldier moved. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hands and reached for his helmet. The motion was careful, as if he wanted everyone to see. With a soft sound, the helmet came free. He held it for a moment, then lowered it to the crystal floor. Gasps echoed through the hall. Removing armor in the crystal hall was unheard of. The environment itself was carefully controlled for Aurelian biology, not for others. Even standing unshielded was considered risky. Sarilith's smile faded slightly, replaced by confusion. The human's face was visible now. He was young but not inexperienced. Lines marked his skin from sun and stress. His eyes were steady, focused, and clear. There was no anger in them, no pride, only patience. Sarilith felt an unexpected unease. She had expected him to argue or bow. Instead, he continued. He removed the chest plate next, setting it beside the helmet. Then the arm guards, then the boots. Each piece was placed neatly, respectfully, as if the armor itself mattered. The hall grew silent. Even the crystal walls seemed to dim slightly, reacting to the shift in energy. "Stop this," one of the elder advisors said, his voice sharp. "Human, you are violating protocol." The soldier looked up, meeting the gaze of the elders. "I am aware," he said calmly. His voice was steady and quiet, yet it carried across the hall without effort. "I am not here to challenge your rules. I am here to show you something." Sarilith stood from her throne now. "Show us what?" she asked, her earlier mockery gone. "That humans do not value their own safety." The soldier turned his attention to her. He inclined his head slightly, not a bow, but a sign of respect. "We value it deeply," he said. "That is why we learn to live without guarantees." He stepped forward. Bare feet touched the crystal floor. Sensors hidden within the hall activated instantly, scanning his body. Data streamed to the elder consoles. Temperature variance, pressure adaptation, energy exposure, all outside safe limits for an unshielded visitor. Sarilith watched as the readings appeared in the air, her breath caught. "He should be in pain," she whispered. But the soldier's expression did not change. He took another step, then another. His breathing was slow and controlled. His shoulders remained relaxed. He was not forcing his way forward. He was walking as if this was normal, as if the environment was simply another challenge to be understood. The elders murmured among themselves. This was impossible. Even with training, most species relied on technology to survive here. The hall itself was a test of advancement. The soldier stopped at the center of the hall. He did not look triumphant. He did not raise his arms. He simply stood. Humans come from a world where comfort is rare, he said. Our planet does not protect us. It challenges us every day. Heat, cold, pressure, loss. We learned early that armor can fail. Shields can break. So we trained what cannot be taken away. Sarilith descended the steps slowly. Her guards moved to follow her, then hesitated at her raised hand. She walked closer to the human, studying him not as a curiosity, but as a person. You allowed us to mock you, she said. Why? He met her gaze. Because words do not show who we are, he replied. Only choices do. She looked at the armor on the floor. It seemed smaller now. Less important. You could have refused, she said. You could have left. Yes, he agreed. But then you would have learned nothing about us, and we would have learned nothing about you. Sarilith felt something shift inside her. All her life she had been told that strength was displayed, announced, enforced. Yet here stood someone who had answered laughter with calm, insult with patience. The elder advisor spoke again, more carefully this time. Human soldier, you have made your point. Return to your armor. The soldier shook his head gently. Not yet, he said. There is one more thing. He turned slowly, letting the gathered delegates see him fully. Humans do not remove armor to show weakness, he said. We remove it to show trust. I am standing in your hall under your rules without protection. I trust that you will see this not as disrespect, but as honesty. Silence followed. Sarilith realized she had been holding her breath. She released it slowly. For the first time, she felt unsure of her own assumptions. This human had not threatened, not demanded, not boasted. He had simply walked forward and allowed the truth to speak. You are different than I expected, she said quietly. He nodded once. So are you. A faint smile touched her lips, small and thoughtful. Then perhaps today is not about judgment, she said. Perhaps it is about learning. High above, the elders exchanged long looks. Data still streamed across their displays, numbers that should not exist. Endurance beyond calculation, adaptation without aid. The human soldier finally stepped back toward his armor, not hurried, not weak. He knelt and began to put it back on piece by piece. Each movement was careful, respectful. Sarilith watched closely. She understood now that the armor was not his strength. It was simply a tool. As the helmet sealed and the soldier stood once more, the hall felt different. The crystal light shifted again, softer somehow. The princess returned to her throne, but she did not sit the same way as before. Her posture was straighter, her eyes sharper, her thoughts louder than the hall itself. The human had walked, and in doing so had opened a door she did not know existed. After the human soldier finished putting his armor back on, the crystal hall did not return to its earlier mood. The laughter was gone. The quiet now felt heavier, filled with thoughts instead of pride. Delegates whispered among themselves, but their voices stayed low, as if speaking too loudly might break something fragile that had just formed. Princess Sarilith sat on her throne, her hands resting lightly on the armrests. Her eyes remained fixed on the human. She had expected relief once the strange moment ended, but instead she felt unsettled. Her tutors had taught her that first impressions were truths. Yet her first impression of the human had already failed. The elders called for a brief recess. Light barriers shifted, signaling a pause in formal proceedings. Delegates began to move, some gathering in small groups, others leaving the hall entirely. The human soldier remained where he was, standing quietly near his armor as if waiting for further instruction. Sarilith rose again, surprising even herself. She dismissed her guards with a glance and walked down the steps alone. Each step echoed softly. She could feel eyes following her, but she ignored them. She stopped a short distance from the human. Up close, she noticed details she had missed before, the way he stood evenly balanced, the way his breathing stayed slow. The small marks on his armor that suggested use, not decoration. You did not give your name, she said. Names matter less than actions where I come from, he replied. Then after a moment, but I am called Elias, she nodded. I am Sarilith, I know, he said. There was no flattery in his tone, only acknowledgement. She folded her hands behind her back. You embarrassed me today. I did not intend to, Elias said. I only intended to answer you honestly. She looked away briefly, then back at him. I believed strength was something you showed, she said. You showed something else. Elias tilted his head slightly. Endurance? Yes, she said softly. That word is spoken often in our histories, but rarely practiced. Before either could continue, one of the elder envoys approached. His long robes shimmered with shifting symbols of authority. Princess, he said carefully, the council requests your presence, and the humans, Sarilith nodded. Of course. They were guided through a side corridor away from the public hall. The walls here were smooth and dim, less decorative, built for function. As they walked, Sarilith felt a strange awareness beside her. Elias did not look around in awe or fear. He walked as if corridors were corridors, no matter where they existed. The council chamber was smaller, circular, with a table of crystal at its center. The elders sat around it, their expressions serious. Data projections still floated in the air, displaying readings from the earlier event. You disrupted a sacred protocol, one elder said, addressing Elias. Explain why we should not consider this an insult. Elias met their gaze calmly. Because insult requires intent to harm, he said. I came to communicate, not to diminish, and yet you violated our environmental safeguards, another elder said. You risked your life. Yes, Elias said simply. Sarilith noticed how easily he accepted that statement, as if risk was a familiar companion. Why, she asked before the elders could continue. Elias turned to her. Because sometimes the only way to be heard is to remove the barriers between us, the elders exchanged looks. One of them tapped the table, and a new projection appeared. It showed comparative data of species tolerance levels. Humans were marked low in most categories, yet the live data from the hall contradicted this. Our records say your species should not have endured what you did, an elder said. Explain this contradiction. Elias took a slow breath. Your records measure limits based on averages, he said. Humans train outside averages. We condition our bodies and minds not to be comfortable, but to function when comfort is gone. Sarilith leaned forward. You mean suffering? Elias shook his head. We mean adaptation, the word echoed in the chamber. Another elder spoke. Your species lacks the biological advantages of many here. No natural armor, no energy organs, no built-in shields. Why would evolution choose such weakness? Elias considered the question. Perhaps because reliance creates fragility, he said. When something is always there, losing it becomes fatal. Humans learned early that nothing is guaranteed. Silence followed. The elders had no immediate response. Sarilith felt a strange warmth in her chest, not pride but recognition. She remembered her own childhood lessons, always conducted behind shields, always supervised. She had never been allowed to fail without protection. The meeting ended without judgment. The elders dismissed them, stating that further discussion would follow later. As they exited the chamber, Sarilith felt her thoughts racing. She stopped in the corridor. Walk with me, she said to Elias. He nodded. They moved through the palace gardens where bioluminescent plants glowed softly. The air here was gentler, more compatible. Sarilith noticed Elias relax slightly, not from relief but awareness. You were not afraid, she said suddenly. I was cautious, he corrected. Fear and caution are not the same, she smiled faintly. Most of my people do not know the difference. They stopped near a pool of light reflecting water. Sarilith looked at her reflection, then at his. They looked nothing alike, yet for the first time that difference felt less important. Do humans always answer mockery with silence, she asked. Not always, Elias said. But often it is more effective, she laughed softly, embarrassed. I was wrong about you, and I was uncertain about you, he said. But uncertainty leaves room for learning, she studied him closely. You did not come here to impress, no, he said. I came to represent what we are, not what you expect, the palace chime sounded, calling Sarilith back to duty. She sighed quietly. This conversation will not be welcomed by all, change rarely is, Elias replied. As they parted, Sarilith felt a sense of anticipation instead of dread. Something had begun that could not easily be undone. Later that cycle, alone in her chambers, Sarilith replayed the events in her mind. The laughter, the walk, the silence that followed. She realized that the human had not taken anything from her. He had given her perspective. Across the palace, Elias stood in his assigned quarters, removing his helmet once more. He felt the familiar weight of attention and expectation, but also something new. Hope. Two worlds had not clashed, they had listened. And that, Elias knew, was only the beginning. The next cycle began quietly, but the palace felt restless. Light shifted through the crystal walls in slow waves, responding to emotions as much as movement. Servants moved carefully, guards stood straighter, and whispers traveled faster than footsteps. What had happened in the crystal hall had not faded. It had settled into the palace like a question that refused to sleep. Princess Sarilith stood at the edge of her balcony, looking out over the city below. Towers of crystal and light stretched toward the horizon, connected by flowing bridges and energy paths. It was beautiful, ordered, and safe. It had always been safe. Yet now safety felt smaller than it had before. Her thoughts returned again and again to the human soldier. Elias. He had walked without armor and spoken without pride. He had not tried to dominate or impress. He had simply existed, and that had been enough to shake traditions that had stood for centuries. A soft chime sounded behind her. One of her attendants entered carefully. "Princess, the council has issued a request," Sarilith turned. "For me?" "Yes," the attendant said. "And for the human representative," Sarilith nodded. "Prepare transport. I will attend." As the attendant left, Sarilith took one last look at the city. She realized that for the first time she was not thinking about how strong her people were. She was thinking about how prepared they truly were. Elias waited in a quiet chamber near the outer ring of the palace. The room was simple, designed for off-world guests. He stood near the window, stretching his fingers slowly, feeling the subtle differences in gravity and air density. He had learned to notice such things early in his training. Awareness kept humans alive. When the escort arrived, he followed without comment. The council chamber this time was different. The projections were gone. The elders sat closer together, their expressions unreadable. Sarilith took her place beside them, not above. That alone sent a quiet signal. One of the elders spoke first. "Human Elias, you demonstrated endurance that exceeds our records. This has raised questions." Elias inclined his head slightly. "Questions are a good beginning." Another elder leaned forward. "We wish to understand whether your endurance is unique or representative of your species." Sarilith felt her attention sharpen. This mattered. If Elias was an exception, the moment could be dismissed. If he was not, everything changed. Elias answered carefully. "I am trained," he said, "but I am not unique. Humans do not measure strength by rarity. We measure it by repeatability." The elders exchanged looks. "Explain." "Our systems are built to teach ordinary individuals to perform under extraordinary conditions," Elias said. "Because we assume anyone may be called upon." Sarilith felt a strange tightening in her chest. On Oralia, champions were selected, enhanced, and elevated. The idea that any human could be trained to endure such conditions was unsettling. The elder who had spoken first nodded slowly. "Then we will test this claim." The word test echoed in the chamber. Sarilith straightened. "What kind of test?" "A demonstration," the elder replied. "Controlled, non-harmful. We will observe human methods of endurance and adaptation." Elias remained calm. "You may observe," he said. "But humans do not perform for spectacle." The elder paused. "Then what do you propose?" "Participation," Elias said. "Understanding comes from experience, not distance." Silence followed. Sarilith spoke before the elders could refuse. "I will participate." Several elders turned sharply toward her. "Princess, this is not advisable." "Nor was allowing an unarmored human to walk our hall," she replied evenly. "Yet we allowed it, and we learned." The elders hesitated. Tradition pressed against curiosity. At last, one of them nodded. "Very well, a limited trial, observational only." The location chosen was an inner training chamber, normally used by palace guards. Environmental controls were adjustable, able to simulate various conditions safely. Safe, at least, by Aurelian standards. Sarilith entered the chamber wearing simple robes, no personal shielding beyond minimal life support. Elias wore his armor but did not activate its advanced systems. The elders observed from behind a transparent barrier. The chamber lights dimmed. Temperature shifted slightly upward. Gravity increased by a small margin. Sarilith felt it immediately. Her steps grew heavier. Her breathing changed. It was uncomfortable but not painful. She glanced at Elias. He noticed the change but did not react outwardly. "Begin," an elder's voice echoed. Elias removed his helmet and set it aside. "Focus on your breathing," he said to Sarilith. "Slow, deep. Do not fight the environment. Let your body adjust." She frowned slightly. "Our training teaches us to counter conditions with technology." "This is different," Elias said gently. "Trust your body." The temperature rose again. Sarilith felt heat along her skin, her muscles tensed. Instinct told her to step back. Elias adjusted his stance, widening his footing slightly. "Feel where the strain gathers," he said. Release it gradually, she tried. At first it felt strange, almost foolish. But after a few moments something shifted. Her breathing steadied. The heaviness did not vanish, but it became manageable. The elders watched closely, recording every movement. Minutes passed. The chamber adjusted again, this time lowering oxygen levels slightly, still within safe limits but uncomfortable for untrained species. Sarilith felt her heart rate increase. Panic brushed the edge of her thoughts. Elias noticed immediately. "Do not rush," he said. "Panic wastes energy," she focused on his voice. She slowed her breath. The panic eased, replaced by effort. She realized then that Elias was not enduring alone. He was guiding her. When the test ended, the chamber returned to normal conditions. Sarilith leaned forward slightly, hands on her knees, catching her breath. She was tired, but she was standing. The elders were silent. "You adapted," Elias said quietly. Sarilith looked up at him, eyes bright. "I did." The Elder Council reconvened immediately after. Data streamed across their displays. The princess's physiological responses showed clear adaptation curves. "This should not be possible without assistance," one elder murmured. "It was possible because assistance was internal," another replied. Sarilith addressed them. "Our people have forgotten something," she said. "We built safety so well that we forgot how to stand without it." Elias remained silent, allowing her words to stand. The elders dismissed the trial without formal declaration, but the shift was undeniable. Human methods were no longer dismissed as crude. They were studied. Later, in a quiet corridor, Sarilith walked beside Elias again. "You changed more than data today," she said. "I only shared what we know," he replied. She stopped walking. "No. You reminded us that strength begins before armor." He looked at her, seeing not a princess, but a young leader standing at the edge of change. "You carry that understanding now," he said. "What you do with it matters more than what I did." Sarilith nodded slowly. For the first time, she felt the weight of leadership not as inheritance, but as responsibility. Across the palace, conversations shifted. Guards questioned their reliance on shields. Scholars requested human training records. The word endurance began appearing in new contexts. Elias returned to his quarters that cycle, exhausted but steady. He had not raised a weapon. He had not made a threat, yet the palace was different. Sarilith returned to her chambers and removed her ceremonial jewelry. It felt heavier than before. She set it aside and stood quietly, replaying the sensation of the chamber, the strain, the adaptation. She smiled softly. The human had walked into her world without armor. Now her world was learning how to walk on its own. The change inside the palace did not arrive loudly. It moved quietly, through looks held a moment longer, through guards adjusting their stance, through scholars pausing before activating tools they had always relied on. The idea Elias had introduced did not demand attention. It waited, and because it waited, it grew. Princess Sarilith felt it everywhere she went. In the council corridors, elders spoke more slowly, choosing words with care. In the training halls, instructors experimented with exercises that did not rely entirely on technology. In private chambers, advisors questioned old assumptions that had never before been questioned. And at the center of it all stood a young princess who had once laughed. Sarilith sat alone in a quiet chamber reserved for reflection. The walls glowed softly, responding to her calm but focused state. She replayed the memory of the training chamber again and again. The heat, the weight, the moment when panic had tried to take control, and the moment she had chosen to breathe instead. She had adapted. That realization carried both pride and discomfort. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter," she said. Elias stepped inside. He no longer wore his armor fully sealed. It rested inactive against his body, more habit than necessity. He inclined his head respectfully. "You requested my presence," he said. "Yes," Sarilith replied. "I wanted to speak without observers," he nodded. "Then I will listen." She stood and walked slowly toward the center of the chamber. "The elders are divided," she said. "Some believe what you showed is dangerous. Others believe it is necessary. Both can be true," Elias said. She studied him. "You are not afraid of their judgment." "I am used to it," he replied. "Humans are often misunderstood before we are known." Sarilith exhaled slowly. "I was one of those misunderstandings." Elias did not answer immediately. "You were honest," he said at last. "That matters," she smiled faintly. Honesty is easier when one believes they are superior. It is harder when that belief is challenged. There was a pause between them, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. The elders plan a larger demonstration, Saralith continued. Not just observation, integration. Elias' expression remained calm, but his attention sharpened. Explain, they wish to see if your methods can be taught, she said. Not copied exactly, but understood. And you, Elias asked gently. What do you wish? Saralith looked away briefly, then met his gaze. I wish to learn not as a ruler, as a student. Elias considered her words carefully. Learning requires humility, he said, especially when it comes from unexpected places. I know, she replied. That is why I asked you. The next cycle marked the beginning of something unprecedented. A small group was formed, carefully selected. Guards, scholars, advisors, no champions, no elites, ordinary individuals by Aurelian standards. Elias stood before them in a simple training chamber. No banners, no projections, just space and quiet. You are not here to become human, he said calmly. You are here to understand yourselves. Some shifted uneasily. Others listened closely. We will not push beyond safety, Elias continued. Endurance is not about suffering. It is about awareness, control. Choice. Saralith stood among the group, not elevated, not separated. She wore the same simple clothing as the others. The sight alone sent whispers through the palace. The exercises were basic: breathing, balance, focus, removing reliance on constant feedback systems, learning to notice discomfort without fleeing from it. At first, frustration surfaced quickly. Aurelians were used to immediate correction from technology. When something felt wrong, systems adjusted. Now nothing adjusted unless they did. Saralith struggled alongside them. She felt the urge to demand assistance, to activate safeguards. Each time she stopped herself. Elias moved among them, offering quiet guidance, never commanding, never criticizing, only observing and adjusting suggestions. Your body tells you more than your displays, he reminded them. Slowly, change happened. After several cycles, the council convened again. This time not to judge Elias, but to hear reports. Data showed increased tolerance, improved mental resilience, reduced panic response. These results are statistically significant, one elder admitted, but they also introduce risk, another countered. Encouraging vulnerability contradicts our doctrines, Saralith stood. We have mistaken vulnerability for weakness, she said clearly. What we are seeing is preparation. The room fell quiet. An elder turned to Elias. If your species lives this way, why use armor at all? Elias answered without hesitation. Because wisdom is knowing when to endure and when to protect. Humans do both. That answer stayed with Saralith long after the meeting ended. Later that cycle, she and Elias walked through the outer gardens again. The light was softer now, tuned to a calmer state. Saralith's steps were slower, more grounded. I am changing my people's future, she said quietly. You are opening it, Elias replied. The choice remains theirs. She stopped walking. What if they reject it? Then you will still have learned, he said. And learning never truly fails. She looked at him, really looked at him. You do not seek influence, yet you create it. Elias smiled faintly. Influence follows example, not intention. A message arrived that cycle from off-world observers. Word of the unarmored walk and the endurance trials had spread. Other species were curious, some skeptical, some concerned. The Aurelians stood at a crossroads. The council issued a statement, calm, measured, historic. They announced a joint endurance symposium with human advisors. Voluntary participation. No force. No hierarchy. The galaxy listened. Saralith addressed her people publicly for the first time since the changes began. She stood not behind shields, but beneath open crystal light. I once believed strength was inherited, she said. I was wrong. Strength is practiced. The crowd was silent, attentive. A human showed us that survival does not come from perfection, but from preparation, from choice, from endurance. She paused. We will not abandon our technology. We will not deny who we are, but we will remember what exists beneath it. Applause did not erupt. Instead, something deeper occurred. Acceptance. Elias watched from the edge of the gathering. He felt no pride, only quiet satisfaction. This was never about humans being greater. It was about humans being understood. That night, Saralith stood once more on her balcony. The city below shimmered gently. She felt taller somehow, not in power, but in awareness. Elias prepared for departure. His mission was nearly complete. Saralith sought him out before dawn. Will you return to Earth now, she asked. Yes, he said. Others will continue the exchange, she hesitated. I would like to visit your world someday. You would be welcome, Elias replied. But it would challenge you, she smiled. I am beginning to understand the value of that. They stood in silence for a moment. You walked without armor, she said softly, and taught us to stand. Elias inclined his head. You chose to learn. That was the greater step. As he departed the palace, Sarilith watched from above. She did not feel loss. She felt momentum. The galaxy had not shifted because of a weapon or a war. It had shifted because someone took off his armor and someone else chose to follow. The day Elias left the Aurelian palace did not feel like an ending. It felt like a pause between breaths. The palace returned to its routines, but nothing fit quite the same way it had before. Systems still hummed, shields still glowed, armor was still worn, yet beneath all of it something quieter had taken root. Princess Sarilith stood on the high observation platform as the human transport lifted away from the docking ring. She did not wave, she did not speak. She simply watched until the ship became a small point of light and then vanished into open space. For the first time in her life, she did not feel protected by the palace around her. She felt responsible for it. In the cycles that followed, the changes Elias had helped begin continued to grow. The endurance program became optional but popular. Guards asked questions instead of following routines blindly. Scholars rewrote long-held assumptions about dependence and resilience. Even the elders, slow to change, began attending sessions quietly, observing without comment. Sarilith made one decision that surprised everyone. She removed her personal shield during public appearances, not completely, not recklessly, but enough that people noticed. At first, whispers followed her through the halls. Some saw it as symbolic, others saw it as dangerous. Sarilith saw it as honest. She remembered Elias' words. Wisdom is knowing when to endure and when to protect. She was choosing when. Messages arrived from across the galaxy. Some worlds expressed curiosity, others skepticism. A few quietly asked for human contact information. The Aurelians found themselves no longer just observers of galactic culture, but contributors to a new conversation. Months passed. On Earth, Elias returned to his unit without ceremony. There were no medals, no grand speeches. He filed his reports carefully and answered questions simply. When asked what the mission achieved, he said only that understanding had begun. Some did not understand his meaning. But others did. Human instructors were soon invited to Aurelian space stations, not to train soldiers, but to share methods of stress control, mental resilience, and adaptation. In return, Aurelian scientists shared knowledge of energy systems and environmental design. There was no alliance announced, no treaty signed in bold letters. Trust grew quietly. Sarilith followed every report closely. She read transcripts of human instructors speaking to Aurelian trainees. She studied footage of Aurelians practicing breathing techniques that once would have seemed unnecessary. She smiled when she saw frustration turn into calm. One evening, she visited the original Crystal Hall alone. The space was empty, its vastness echoing softly. She walked to the exact spot where Elias had removed his armor. She stood there and closed her eyes. She remembered her laughter, her certainty, her ignorance. She opened her eyes again and felt gratitude instead of shame. The elders joined her later that cycle. They stood beside her, not above her. That alone marked how far things had shifted. We have received a request, one elder said. From the Galactic Assembly, Sarilith turned. What kind of request? They wish for you to address them, the elder replied. Regarding the Aurelian human exchange, Sarilith felt a steady calm instead of nerves. I will speak. The assembly hall was larger than the Crystal Hall, filled with representatives of countless species. Many wore advanced armor. Many relied on floating shields. Many believed they understood strength. Sarilith stood at the center, unshielded, her posture relaxed and grounded. I once mocked a human soldier, she began. Not because he was weak, but because I did not understand him, the hall quieted. He removed his armor and walked. Not to shame us, not to challenge us, but to show us that survival does not begin with technology. It begins with choice. She spoke of endurance, of adaptation, of balance between protection and preparation. She did not praise humans as superior, she praised them as honest. We do not need to become human, she said, but we must remember what exists beneath our systems. Because one day systems may fail, there was no applause, but there was attention, deep and focused. After the address, representatives approached her quietly. Some asked questions. Some simply nodded. A shift had begun. Back on Earth, Elias watched the broadcast in a small briefing room. He did not smile. He felt something quieter and more meaningful, relief. He had not been wrong. Years passed. Sarilith grew into her role not as a symbol, but as a leader shaped by experience. When she finally ascended fully to the throne, she did not do so surrounded by shields. She did so standing openly, her guards present but not imposing. Her first declaration was simple. We will be strong enough to stand even when protection is gone. The Aurelians did not abandon their technology. They refined their relationship with it. Children were taught not only how systems worked, but how their own minds and bodies responded to challenge. Training halls echoed with effort and laughter. Fear was no longer hidden. It was addressed. One cycle, a message arrived that made Sarilith pause. Elias had been selected to lead a joint human-alien endurance council. She requested a direct link. When his image appeared, older now, more marked by time but unchanged in presence, she inclined her head respectfully. You walked into our world, she said, and never realized how far your steps would echo. Elias shook his head gently. I knew, he said. I just did not know how. She smiled. I would like to walk into yours someday. You will, he replied. But remember, Earth does not protect its visitors gently. Her eyes brightened. Then I will prepare. The connection ended, leaving Sarilith standing alone in her chamber. She looked at her reflection in the crystal wall. She no longer saw a princess who mocked. She saw a leader who learned. Across the galaxy, the phrase unarmored walk entered common speech. It came to mean choosing honesty over display, preparation over pride, endurance over assumption. No wars followed, no empires fell, but something more lasting happened. Species stopped asking who was strongest. They began asking who was ready. And it all began when a human soldier took off his armor and walked, and an alien princess chose to see him not as weak, but as human.